Dr. Laverne, I'm going to come to you first. Tell us a little bit about what motherhood resentment is and how common it is.
I think in its most severe form, in psychiatry we see it as a postnatal or postpartum depression, and that is pretty common. About 13% of women can have a postpartum or postnatal depression, and it sort of starts in the first month after you've had your baby. The first 4 days to 5 days, maybe a week, the postnatal blues is a normal kind of experience, but you know it's also normal for people to know that that's something they can expect. But if that process continues and it becomes more severe as time continues, up to 8 weeks after you've had your baby, then we start worrying that there could be a postnatal depression manifesting.
Could you have motherhood resentment without having postpartum depression per se?
I think definitely so. I think, as I said, in its most severe form, that's how it presents from a psychiatric point of view. But motherhood resentment, I think, is something that people find as a surprise when they've had a child. You know, this is this wonderful thing that's happening to you. You're supposed to be happy about this baby being born, and now this little creature is giving you a feeling that this is not all it's cracked up to be. And it is such a big adjustment. If we look just the sleep deprivation process that happens after a baby is born, it leaves people tired, it leaves people with resentment, and also possibly resentment of the partner, which is an important component to include in this process. So yes, definitely you don't necessarily have to have the most severe version of it, but it is on a spectrum.
Gaopalelwe, I want to come to you now because you've been very open in speaking and blogging about your experiences with motherhood resentment. And it's quite common for mothers to feel resentment at some point during their motherhood journey, whether that's on a daily basis or whether a little bit less frequent. Do you think resentment's always necessarily born out of circumstances, that some mothers are more likely to feel resentment based on the circumstances in which they have to parent?
I think a lot of it does have to do with circumstances. For me specifically, it was. I was actually quite ashamed of talking about it, even after I had discovered it. So for me, I was a single mom, rejected by my own family as well. I couldn't get help from anybody at home. My friends didn't know how to assist me with this new baby. I was in this city. I didn't know what I was doing, and I just ended up feeling like my son is the burden. He was the easiest target because everybody else who I was angry at wasn't there. His father wasn't there. Some of my family members who was expecting to help me were not there. My friends were there when they could, but I looked at him and I thought, if you weren't here, I wouldn't be so tired. I wouldn't be so needing of support and security. So I ended up just taking it out on him.
You said you felt shame in expressing that resentment. And I think many mothers do. That's why they sort of keep it very quiet, internalize it, rather than expressing that and sharing that sentiment. But now there seems to be a slight movement towards allowing mothers the space to voice that resentment and for that not to be met with judgment. Why do you think women are still so hesitant to voice what is a common experience?
I think it's because a lot is expected from women, especially mothers. I mean, people expect us to be super mom. That's a word, that's a thing. And for me, for the most part, I was seen as super mom, a single mother who got a baby before she even got employed. She was still studying. I managed to get a job, raising my son on my own for the most part before his dad came around again. So I was seen as, you know, the mother who's doing it. The mother who's, you know, who loves her child so much. So for me to come back and say, actually, my son stopped my dreams. If he wasn't here, I would have probably done my honors and my PhD by now. I would be verifying my career by now. So it was hard for me to say to people, I resented my son, and also to admit that in my resentment, I shouted, I was unfair, I didn't understand his behavior. I was mostly irritated and annoyed by him when we were behind closed doors. But, you know, when people were looking, we were smiling and like, yeah, he's growing. So it was hard to admit it.
Doctor, just to come to this point, because I think it's very important to make the distinction that feeling resentment towards your child doesn't mean you've stopped loving them, right?
Absolutely. As Gaopalelwe was talking, I was just thinking, it's not that you stop loving the baby or the child, it's the parenting part that you're not enjoying and the parenting part that you're not loving. So the baby always stays loved, but the parenting part is where the difficulty part comes in.
We're talking mostly about motherhood, but surely some fathers also experience resentment towards this new intrusion on their family life and perhaps their career, their financial security. But how, or is it rather easier for them to process and express that resentment than it might be for mothers, given the different roles in parenting situations in South Africa?
You're 100% right, Annalie. Moms get 9 months to get used to the idea that they're going to have a baby. They smell different, they feel different, their bodies change. Dads don't have that opportunity, and then all of a sudden there's a baby here. And it's a major pressure on a relationship to have a new baby in the house, specifically with first parents. So dads struggle too. There's now a lot of research being done on the concept of postnatal depression in men, that this is actually a concept and something we need to keep an eye out for when we look at the dads as well. And I think, when moms want to try and be the best mom, as we hear from a brave blogger, that dads can be felt left out. They maybe want to help, but they're going to be supervised and no, don't hold the baby like that and don't touch the baby like that. And I think this is important then for moms to say, okay, I'm handing the baby over, I'm going for a nap, I'm going out with friends, so that you actually have that break as a mom as well. And for the dad to then be hands-on. If the dad wants to be hands-on, great, take the break.
Gaopalelwe, you spoke about being a single mom, and I think that's the reality for so many mothers in South Africa. It is unfortunately a problem in our social makeup that many mothers carry the burden of parenthood very much alone. Do you think that contributed to the difficulties in your relationship with the baby's father, not in terms of having still a romantic relationship, but in terms of co-parenting?
I think it did, because I think for us, I had to move away from home and come to live in Johannesburg while he stayed back then. And even when he still came over to visit us on weekends, it didn't feel like enough, because I was a first-time mother, he was a first-time father. But just seeing him for 2 days was not enough for me. I just felt like, the entire week it's all on me and you're not here, So that exerted a lot of it affected our relationship a lot, to a point where it fell apart and he was not there anymore at all. Even having that option of being able to just walk away from us, for me, really caused me to be more resentful even more, because I was like, okay, so you can choose to walk away. I can't. I'm a mom. I'm with this child here 24/7. I can't just choose to walk away. I say that as well in my blog, that if I didn't do anything for my child, who was going to do that? Nobody was. That's how the resentment even grew and grew and grew.
How did you eventually overcome that resentment?
I think it took one, because mine was going on for so long and it was so hidden, because like you guys were saying, I loved my son so much. It's something I reflect on my blog, that he was the best thing to ever happen to me. So it took a while. I was resenting him for a while, until this one day where this incident happened, and I shouted at him so hard, and he just cried and, caved in. And I realized, wait, you are going through so much on your own. You're forgetting that this child is also going through the same stuff. He lives with you. He has to go through so much as well. That's when I started having to research online. Do I hate my child? I think that's the first thing I Googled, because I was like, I can't imagine that I actually hate my child. That's when I found out that it's actually resentment, and that's when the journey of healing began. I didn't see a therapist, because at the time I couldn't afford one. I basically just Googled online, read online. I couldn't even talk to the people around me about it much. And that's how I got to where I am, and I made conscious, gentle, and honest parenting. And we are at our best place. I even have a second child.
That's amazing. Dr. Levin, I think it's very important to end off this interview by finding out, for mothers and fathers who find themselves really struggling with that resentment, whether they have a newborn, and that could, in fact, as you've indicated, be postpartum depression in its most serious form of resentment. What should parents do in terms of recognizing those symptoms, and when do they need to reach out for help beyond what Google and support organizations can do?
Sure. I think when functionality becomes impaired, when the bonding process with the baby is affected, and there's a lot of impact on babies around attachments later and so forth, if that's starting to be affected, then it is meaningful to get professional help. A therapist is a good place to start. Go see your general practitioner to look at medication. There's a great book, I recommend it to my patients. Brooke Shields wrote a book on her own experience with postnatal depression, Down Came the Rain. There's lots of mummies that's blogging. Scary Mummy is an excellent blog that we also refer patients to. I think get as much information, and there is help out there. It's quite meaningful to start talking and have the narrative going.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to you both for sharing your experiences and your knowledge on the subject. We've been speaking to Dr. Laverne Martini and SA Mommy blogger Gaopalelwe Phalaetsile.